Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. Be greatly appreciated. Please do that. Help offset those dislikes. Thank you so much. But over to the point. I came across a video by OmarIsuf, the shaman philosopher, a YouTube fitness talking about what's holding you back. And he was talking a little bit about placebo. And a lot of the studies that we have on placebo, studies we have looking at what people have been told their genetics are and how that actually affects you. And he's right. It's like the Boog says, it's a mindset. And case in point, we'll get over to the anabolics in a minute. But the genetics one, he pointed out there are studies showing that when they've taken people and told them that they have great genetics or bad genetics for strength or whatever, that when you follow their training afterwards, they meet the expectations of what they've been told. Okay, so in other words, if a person believes, even if it's delusional, they've been lied to, that they have great genetics, they will get much, much better results from their training. If they've been told they have bad genetics, they will get inferior results from their training, even if it turns out they had pretty good genetics. So what people have been convinced of as the truth will impact their results. And here's what I would say about genetics. The reason you guys shouldn't worry about this, you really shouldn't worry about it. You need to just reach your full potential. I mean, a perfect example. All of YouTube Fitness generally agrees that I have the worst genetics on YouTube Fitness. People have made videos about it. Like that Igor guy actually said that I have genetics so bad that God hates me. Right? Yet I'm in my 40s and I can squat over 500 pounds and I deadlift 600 pounds. Right? We've seen it recently. I've demonstrated all these recently on camera with calibrated plates. If I can do that in my 40s with the worst genetics possible on YouTube Fitness, then that means all of you guys with average genetics should be able to squat 550, 600. You should be able to deadlift 700 pounds easily. It's totally within your ability. And so that's the thing that people need to think about with the whole genetics thing. Because if someone who has the worst genetics can pull those off in their 40s, you should be able to beat that. Every one of you should be able to lift more than me. So he's got an interesting point there. But it has to do with the fact of what you've been told, what you believe. What you believe. Because like for me personally, I told myself years ago that I've got great genetics for strength. Even though everyone says they're the worst, it doesn't matter what they say. I have convinced myself that I do. Guess what? In spite of having terrible, horrific genetics, I've still gotten pretty strong because I've convinced myself that that's not true. That's not actually true. Like you can actually lie to yourself and get great results. You can actually change your results simply by lying to yourself. And it will actually change your reality in terms of your ability to get progress because you'll be more motivated, you'll train harder, you'll do better. And it has to do with self-programming. It has to do with self-programming. Because if we believe that we are capable of getting a certain result, we will generally do things in our life to facilitate it. Because if you don't believe that you're capable of or worthy of getting a result, you'll sabotage yourself. Right? You'll mess up your sleep. I mean, a perfect example. Somebody who doesn't believe they should reach a result will go out and party and do something stupid or lay in bed at night awake and not get the sleep that they need to actually make their gains because they'll sabotage themselves. Like they'll do stupid stuff that will sabotage themselves. Someone who really believes that they're going to get these results or capable, they'll actually they'll do things. They'll go out of their way to make sure they get enough protein. They'll make sure they get enough sleep. They'll do these things, right? It's people who don't believe that they actually are capable or deserve or for whatever reason haven't earned some result will actually sabotage themselves with stupid lifestyle choices. It happens all the time. I think it's normal. I think it's a subconscious thing. So convincing yourself that you deserve that matters. But he did point out, and I'll agree with Omar here, that a lot of people, though, the reason you haven't gotten the results is you haven't put in the time. You haven't put in the time. Or the consistency. Because you get people who are like, well, I trained really hard. And I get that with clients who are like, man, I trained really hard. I think I was training hard. But it's like, were you consistent? Were you consistent for 3 years straight? Like, you might have trained really hard for 6 weeks. Might have trained hard for 8 weeks, but then you chilled and took a break. You had downtime, right? These things happen. It's about that consistently. Did you put in that work consistently for long enough? Because that's the other thing. You know, let's talk about something like a 500 deadlift, 550 deadlift. You know what? I think anybody can get to that. did you work at it consistently long enough? And did you actually even apply yourself correctly? In other words, I could say, and I think Omar pointed that out in the video, pretty much anybody average genetics can get a 500 deadlift. But did you actually learn to deadlift correctly? Did you ever step back and say, man, I should probably learn how to deadlift correctly? If you got a major mobility issue or something else that's happening, did you ever correct it? Did you ever actually fix your form? Like if you have terrible, terrible deadlift form to where the point you're bleeding energy, did you take 5 minutes to ever have someone look at your form and fix it? Because, I mean, I've had that also. I've seen guys who are actually strong enough to pull over 500 and they're stuck at 450 or 475 because they never actually learned how to perform a deadlift. Or they had some big mobility issues that they never fixed. They were strong enough to do it already. They never learned how to actually perform the exercise. And that can be a factor. You'd be shocked how often that is. But these are totally reachable. But the thing is that some of these standards that are out there are based around muscle mass. Like a squat is very, very muscle mass oriented, more so than a deadlift. In other words, muscle mass will limit your squat a lot more than it will your deadlift. Well, it takes time to build muscle. So a lot of times guys will have a much stronger deadlift than they do squat early on. That develops much more quickly, and the longer you train, the gap tends to close between the two, unless you have free genetics. Like Taylor Woolham, who literally deadlifts like 400 pounds more than he squats. But he has ape arms. So he's built to deadlift. If he didn't have those ape arms, he'd have a 600 pound, 700 pound deadlift, right? If his arms were shorter. So you have situations like that, but generally the gap closes. Why? Because the squat is more dependent upon muscle mass. It's more dependent on muscle mass than the deadlift is. More dependent on muscle mass, less dependent on leverages. So the gap tends to close over time. So most guys eventually reach a point. It's not uncommon. If you train really hard for 10 years and build great musculature, you might find that there's only a 5 or a 10% difference between your squat and your deadlift, unless you're particularly well built to deadlift. But early on, it's not uncommon for guys to reach a 500 deadlift who only squat 380 or barely squat 400. Or deadlift 530 and still have a 400 squat. But that's usually more novice lifters. But there's a time component. It takes time to build muscle. Building muscle mass takes time. It takes a long time to reach anywhere near your potential. So that's a factor. But the other thing you pointed out is interesting, talking about placebo effect, and this is kind of how supplements themselves work. I always point that out to people. If you get any benefit from a supplement, it was placebo. And we've got the studies he talked about, and I've got another video coming out later on, probably in a couple of weeks, I may, discussing the problems with actual pre-workouts, is that they don't even give a placebo effect in studies, which means, as he talked about, a nocebo happening. It's probably a case of pre-workouts actually physically hurt your results, and therefore it counteracts the placebo effect. They actually are harmful to your gains. I believe that they are. Because normally if you believe something works, you'll get gains from it. Like if you've been told a magic sugar pill will give you gains, it'll usually give you gains. And they'll even give you side effects. Because he talked about the study with on intermediate and advanced lifters who were given fake anabolics, and they all made PRs. They all got stronger. They broke lifetime PRs on the fake steroids in the study. Well, we've all seen the same thing. If you've been in the Iron Game long enough, we've seen the same thing in real life. Like a bunch of friends of mine, we were laughing so hard many, many years ago. When I say many, I'm talking in excess of a decade. If I had to pin it down, I'm going to say 16, 17 years ago. Ballpark. Let me just get it in the ballpark of that. Around 16 or 17 years ago. Guy we knew at the gym was complaining about he was really turning into an asshole, and he was having some anger issues, and he came chatting with the other guys, and he's like, was showing us his gear. He's like, I think my gear is overdosed. Okay? He had been having some roid rage problems. And we know that he had been training really hard lately. Like he was hitting PR after PR after PR. Guy was always sweating in the gym all of a sudden. He had acne, back knee, had a real attitude problem. And he was talking to us saying, this stuff is just making me so angry and so crazy. Like it's got to be overdose. Well, he showed it to us, and it was a known knockoff. Like it was bunk gear that had been circulating that didn't have any anabolic in it. And he had been taking supposedly 500 milligrams of testosterone a week, right? He was getting acne, mainly because he was training harder and sweating more and not taking care of his hygiene. And that's actually what causes his roid acne, is actually bad hygiene. That's the actual cause of it. It's just extra bacteria in your skin you're not washing off from sweating and oil. Active sebaceous glands, they have androgen receptors. It just means you're nasty. You need to work on your hygiene if you get roid acne. But he was getting roid acne. He was having anger issues and roid rage, but he was hitting PRs every single week in the gym off of fake testosterone. There wasn't anything in it. There was no actual drug. He was injecting cottonseed oil. But he got roid-like gains and he got roid-like side effects. Okay? He actually was having rage and anger issues. There was no drug. It's all in his head. But you know what? It worked. So that fake gear actually gave the guy real strength gains, and it gave him real side effects that he experienced, all from placebo. So when you think about that, that tells you a lot about how powerful our minds are, doesn't it? Because I've seen that firsthand. I've watched a guy get results and sides off of fake, totally fake testosterone. And you know what? When we told him it was fake, all of his side effects and all of his gains went away the next week. All of them. As soon as he found out it was fake. He stopped making progress and his anger got sorted and everything else. As soon as he knew it wasn't real. It's how powerful our minds are. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.